Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the Creative Podcast, your safe space for inspirational, inspired, and visionary discussion of all things artistic in marketing. Join me on my journey with friends old and new as... nuts, this isn't your normal podcast, and I'm not normal either, nor are any of my guests.
This is Fuel.
Fuel for thought.
Fuel injected.
Welcome to the Fuel Podcast, where sales and marketing never sounded so good. Fuel is sponsored by agency new business development platform, The Advertist. Email hello@theadvertist.com for a free trial of the preferred choice of growth tools for advertising, PR, marketing, and digital agencies. Tell them I sent you and you'll get all sorts of freebies. I'm your host, a Smith called Keith, and I hope you're staying curious, because coming up, we've got a wonderful stroll through the memories of one of British advertising's funniest and smartest creatives, Mike Everett. And if you don't know Mike, then allow me to introduce him. Ever since the 1970s, Mike has been part of the British advertising profession's tapestry. He's played a senior creative role in many of the wonderful ads that have graced our TVs, cinema screens, newspapers, magazines and billboards. 14 years in the creative department at Collett, Dickenson, Pearce and Partners, worldwide creative director at Lowe International. 2 years ago, Mike decided to write a behind-the-scenes book about some of the world's most famous adverts, the blood, the sweat and the tears. A lot of tears and a lot of sweat. His book, Methods of the Madmen, is an amazing insight into how the industry worked at the height of its powers and what we need to do to make advertising great again. One-word creative briefs and the single-minded proposition. What makes a great client, morality and advertising, why diversity has always mattered, why YouTube ads are terrible, the outrageous antics of the now famous advertising executives, the definition of a great idea, Mike's favourite advert of all time, all wrapped up in a who's who of advertising glitterati. If you like your creative industry stories well done, then this show's for you. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and tell your friends about us. Put the kettle on while we entertain you with 90 seconds of adverts that help us keep the lights on, and we'll be right back.
Stand by in 3.
I learned a new phrase this week. It's known as being hooskadooed. I have to thank my friend Danielle Wiley at influencer marketing agency Sway Group for that one. And for those that need enlightening, Hooskadoo was an American punk rock band from 1979, and their name has been co-opted as a verb to mean that feeling you get when you hadn't thought about something for about 30 or 40 years, and then suddenly something happens that triggers a memory and brings it back, all those feelings from the past. I didn't know it at the time, but I was feeling full on hooskadoo when I was reading this book, which I'm holding up right now, called The Methods of the Madmen. If you've been following the show thus far, you'll know that I went a bit fanboy over Sam Delaney's book, Get Smashed, which is a riveting helicopter view of the British advertising scene in the 1960s, 70s and 80s. Then I read Mike Everett's book, which, if Sam Delaney's book is a helicopter view, this one is an MRI. It goes into incredible detail over the inspiration, planning and creation of some of Britain's most famous adverts. Ones that were created by the totally non-conformative, rulebook destroying advertising agency CDP, or Collett as they were generally known. Given the opportunity to talk to Mike, and a big thank you to Tim Lindsay for setting it up, I spent the entire length of this amazing book being hooskadooed, reminiscing on adverts I hadn't exactly forgotten, but ones that have been consigned to the place where flashbacks come from. Let me just offer this summary. If you're about the same age as me, an early Gen Xer, then much of CDP's work will be familiar to you. If you're a Gen Z, millennial or younger, then this is the book that explains in very practical terms how some of the greatest adverts ever created came into being, giving blow by blow, sometimes literally blow by blow, accounts of the natural caesarean and sometimes breech birth of what I can only describe as the time when British advertising took over the world, at a time when British rock also took over the music business. Was it something in the water? Was it collective divine intervention? Was it a mass cultural awakening? If you want to understand the art of creativity, you need to read this book. I mean, Jesus, even the acknowledgements right at the start of the book read like an advertising industry who's who. But before you do, you need to listen to the rest of this show. Because in a no-holds-barred, uncensored, explicit interview, here's Mike Everett. Who's he? Thank you very much for agreeing to come on the show, Mike.
Pleasure.
How are you?
I'm good. How about you? You're
I'm
okay?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well, and
Good.
all the better for reading this book.
Okay.
It was a fantastic trip down the down memory lane for me. And I mentioned the term "Husker Du" at the start, but just perhaps to overshare and reinforce the narrative here. In my house, every Saturday night, the wife and I grab all the pets and we go to our TV room and we watch a movie. And I've got a big like cinema projection screen, and we do all the kind of ice cream, popcorn stuff, and I recently started doing the kind of pre-movie stuff, like using 1970s trailers and adverts and stuff. My wife being from the USA and me being from the UK, in equal representation, we do the kind of drive-in movie advertising reels and also the Pearl and Dean stuff. And so I was amazed at how many of the ads in the Pearl and Dean reels were considered truly classic cinema adverts that are CDP work. And so, and thankfully, some of them even found their way into the book, like the Silk Cut Zulu advert and the Hamlet one and stuff like that. And for those that don't know about CDP's history, how would you describe the contribution that the agency made to the advertising industry in terms of its sort of product and people?
Well, I think it had a great influence. I mean, we were all influenced really by Doyle Dane in America before that. We wanted to do an English Doyle Dane, if you like. It was kind of unofficial, but because Colin Millward hated the idea of us doing American advertising, he said, no, it's got to be English, it's got to be English, which I think it was. I don't know really how much it influenced people globally, but a lot of people who worked at CDP ended up going global. They came to America. A good example is Colin Probert, who was one of our great account men, who ended up being president of Goodby Silverstein, for example. And other people, there's a guy called David Metcalf, who there was a joke written about him. I thought Carl Alley was a street in New York until I met David Metcalf. He was dead keen on American advertising and jumped ship from Collett just when Collett was really great to come to America when America was becoming less great, But he was a great copywriter. Then you've got people like Graham Fink who ended up going to China.
Who's been on the show, of course. We've had Graham.
Has he? Yeah. He went to China and worked at Ogilvy there for a while. He's obviously College is in his DNA. Then Australia, you've got people like Paul Fishlock, Mike Doyle, and Rob Tomney, all people who ended up in Australia. Graham Watson, another example. And then John Salmon had a very close relationship with Jay Chiat.
Yes.
And they were always together talking to each other from time to time. Every time John went to New York, he saw Jay and vice versa. I mean, that's kind of the influence. I can't really point to any ads and say, oh, that's influenced by Collett or anything like that. But certainly the DNA went out all around the world.
It was just an incredible. It was so different from anything else that was in the industry at the time, wasn't it? Was it? There, reading the book, obviously there was a kind of a cultural thing going on where there was a deliberate effort to try and stand out and be different and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that what kind of attracted you to them in the first place?
No, when I kind of started off like most of us did actually in the mailroom, right?
Yeah, of course.
Worked my way through an agency and eventually got a job because Ron Brown turned up as the creative director of the small agency I was working at. He said, "Do you want to become a writer?" God knows why he said that to me, but so I became a writer. And then I worked at a few agencies. And you looked at the work that was coming out in London. It was Doyle Dane, PKL, Collett, a couple of other places. And you thought, I'd really like to work at one of these places. Doyle Dane was the place I really wanted to work, but I never got offered a job there. But Paul Smith and I did end up going to Collett, and it was an amazing experience. I mean, changes your life going there.
You and Paul Smith have worked together for a long time, didn't you?
We did.
What was the pairing there? I mean, how did you find each other?
Oh, well, what happens? I worked at Charles Barker. This is quite an interesting little story, actually. I worked at Charles Barker, and Paul, I went there in the beginning of 1970. It was a financial agency, basically. Went there, and Paul turned up in the middle of that year, and we got to put on a job for the post office, which they had the account. And I wrote these headlines for the post office. We were at that time kind of on the old scheme of you don't actually work with the person, you send it through to them. And he came in with these headlines I've written. He said, "Did you write these headlines?" I said, very proudly, "Yes." He said, "Well, I think they're terrible." I said, well, we'll have another go at it then. And that's how we got working together, really.
Can you still remember any of them?
No, can't remember any of them.
I mean, obviously, I want to focus on the book because the book hasn't long been out, has it?
It came out a year ago.
Year ago, okay.
Yeah.
Methods of the Madmen, how the advertising men and women of Britain's most awarded advertising agency did their most awarded work. And what was it that inspired you to kind of write the book in the first place?
Okay. Well, we had some years ago when it was the 50th anniversary of Collett's founding, which was April Fool's Day, 1960. We had a reunion, but typical Collett's flash, and it was late. It was about 3 weeks after that. So but we put up a website, and I used to write stuff for this website, not necessarily about ads, but about all sorts of stuff just to keep it occupied. And the first chapter I wrote was the Mr. Spock story.
Right.
Okay. And I've got to show you this book if you can see it. This book here, which is by
right.
Fred Zimmerman.
Yeah,
it describes in great detail how he makes his films. Made his film. I thought I could apply this to advertising. I could do the same technique, talk about every detail of it and how it got made and who was in it, which actors were chosen, and so on. I thought I can actually do this because you know the thing. If you're a great artist, you seal, don't you? So I thought I'll do that technique. So then I thought, like Winston Churchill, who said, "I'm going to write the history of the Second World War because everybody will get my account and that'll be the true one."
Yep.
I thought I'll write an account of all this. And I've got a very good memory. I can remember most of it is written from memory, because I was there when a lot of the stuff was done. But a lot of it is also due to interviews. I go and interview people, and generally over lunch because it was Collett's, and I'd make notes, and then I'd write it out, and then I'd send it to them, say, "Does this tally with what you think you did?" You know, I just like that. I wrote a load of it over several years, and I had 20 chapters. And it wasn't till lockdown that I started to pull it together because I had nothing else to do. And so it's got to get pulled together. And it's like a good commercial. When I started getting it designed by David Hughes, with whom I work a lot at the moment, he's a designer and art director. It grew into something better because we started putting the pictures in it, and I changed some of the headings because I thought I could write a better heading for it. I mean, The Hunt for Hovis Hill is a classic example of a rewrite of another heading I had. Okay. Same with the disemboweling knife. That's another rewrite. That's Terry Lovelock's phrase, by the way.
That's what, sorry?
Terry Lovelock wrote that line.
There are some absolutely fantastic one-liners in here. I mean, that obviously you've pulled out, and I like the one about him being his own worst enemy. I thought that was absolutely hilarious.
Well, the Ron Collins joke, yeah.
Not while I'm still around, he's not. That's absolutely hilarious. It's a great one-liner. But so, go on.
Terry was very funny bloke. You know, very good at those sort of things. And as you saw, one of the sequences is where he sent these all-staff memos round, asking. Saying, and it was in 1976 when it was the hottest summer we'd ever had. When he said, "Can you close the windows because we're doing a test of the central heating system?"
Oh dear, absolutely hilarious.
Anyways,
so I mean, of all of the, I mean, do you know what? I lost count. How many adverts did you cover in here?
Well, there's 20 chapters, but they cover more than that because the Bird's Eye chapter covers about 5 campaigns.
And so, of all of these, have you got a favourite?
Yeah, not a favourite chapter, a favourite ad.
Yeah, go on.
Which is
Istanbul,
because it's beautifully filmed by Bob Brooks, and as you saw, I wrote in it. We were with Bob doing a Barclays Bank shoot down at Wembley, and we said, "Why did you do that shot where you pull focus?" He said, "Because I was running out of time."
And the idea behind it was that it was a secret message, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Being passed
a rocket,
along.
yeah. And it's got. I mean, George Cole's performance is superb in it. You know, I mean, the business with his face. You know, when the other guy turns up and everything. It's a favourite. Tony Brigden and I had a discussion about this once, and it was when we were looking at Alan Waldy's showreel, because Alan was involved in that.
Right.
And he said, "Which commercial do you prefer? The famous Arizona one or that?" And I said, "Actually, honestly, I prefer that one." because it tells a nice story.
It is. It's a very funny story, and
Yeah,
kind of a sort of a yes, a bit of great bit of comic timing in it as well.
yeah,
And I mean, okay, so I wanted to kind of, I mean, we'll obviously touch back on the book as we go through the conversation, because everything that I'm about to ask you has been driven by stuff that I've pulled out of here, and
okay,
but really front and center of it, which I mean, even on the cover, you're talking about the men and women of Britain's advertising industry. I mean,
yeah,
I think we've covered the subject of diversity in the sort of on the podcast before, and we're talking about people. You mentioned yourself that you come from, you worked in the mailroom, and there were plenty of others, famous names that worked in the mailroom. And so we're not talking about people that have come through that were vetted by any process whatsoever. It was just basically on raw ability. And
yeah,
I had Mark Lewis on, who was the dean of the
yeah,
School of Communication Arts recently, and he was basically talking about the how necessary it is to have people from diverse backgrounds, different influences. And I mean, I noticed in the book you carve out space for what you call Nigel Clarke's theory
yeah,
about the CDP creative department, and everybody coming from all these different backgrounds. And I mean, it's kind of like I imagined in my head reading it. It's like a cross between the Young Ones and Oasis in there. Just chaos going on, but managed in some way, shape, or form.
yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, it was a very tough place to work. A lot of people didn't make it for very long because of the piss taking and the jokes and everything that's going on around. You came out of that working there with a incredibly thick skin.
Right.
Nobody could say anything. Anybody else could never beat what you've been subjected to there.
Yeah, so it's like that was the ultimate test was doing some time at CDP.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one case when Indra Sinha and Gary Horner were being hired by David Brown, he said to me and Paul Smith, "Can you take the piss out of them a bit and see how they get on with it?" Give them a hard time.
But wasn't that? I mean, maybe I'm going to show my age a little bit, but I mean, wasn't that basically part of any job? Was it's the old sort of left-handed hammer and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sky hooks and all that sort of business. I mean, that there was always that process, but I guess you guys kind of just took it to the nth degree.
Yeah, it's the old thing about sending the messenger boy out for an artist license, wasn't it? Down to the post office.
Fantastic, and I bet you've got 101 of those little stories. But
Yeah, I'm writing them down. I've got other ones. I'm writing them down as I think of them.
okay.
Stories about people like about Frank and so on. I'll keep them and maybe do something with them one day.
Well, absolutely. I think just the wisdom of the creative department would be absolutely hilarious. But I mean, getting back to the diversity sort of subject here, I mean, do you think that having all those people from such diverse backgrounds without any prejudices of colour, race, sex, gender, whatever it happens to be, allowed you to kind of put yourself in the consumer's shoes and be able to think like they would think? Because I mean, I spoke recently to Paul Grubb, who worked with Dave Trott at GGT,
Yeah.
and basically, and his summary, which I thought was a fantastic way of doing it, was you've got to consider what's in it for them, what's in it for the end user. That's really where you start from. And I thought that was a great kind of place to start. So I've got 3 questions for you here based on the diversity, which is, I mean, do you think that diversity in the industry is linked in any way to the perceived kind of drop in output of advertising that really just swings for the fences in the way that a lot of these classic adverts did?
I think there's a problem that they're hiring everybody. Everybody has to come out of a university now,
Right.
which really you don't need to go to university to do adverts. I mean, they don't see they do courses, but I talked to one person who'd been on a course, and they said, "Oh, they never taught us about any of this." So
it's instinctive.
I think it's a contributory factor to how bad advertising is. There's so many other reasons it's bad. I mean, you can't make jokes about most things now. You couldn't run Zulu now. That's why I put the health warning on it.
The
I mean,
Zulu advert was, I mean, it like I said in the sort of when we first opened up, that Zulu advert cropped up in my in the Pearl and Dean reel that I
Yeah.
was watching, and it was like, you know, it was like, oh my god, you'd never get
Yeah.
away
I
with that
mean,
now.
well, I've got a mate who's an art lecturer, and I gave him a copy of the book, and he flicked through it while he's with me, and he said, "You'll get cancelled for this."
But those adverts did, like I say, swing for the fences. I mean, they were taking a risk because there was there ever a point in there, sort of when you were doing them, and you're thinking, somebody's not going to like this. This is going to offend somebody. Or was that ever considered?
Well, we're just trying to do stuff that, you know, as I kind of say, but I don't say, I don't think. But basically, you come from this background where you know how people think and what they want to see and what they like buying and how they work. So you write something you think, if I like this, there's a good chance they're going to like it. And so we wrote stuff. We didn't do anything unless we liked it.
Right.
You know, if we didn't like it, we didn't do it. You just think, oh yeah, I like that. You get this when you do a good ad. You think, yeah, I really like this ad. I know it's going to work. In here, go with your bones, as Tony Brignall calls it. You know.
There was a kind of, but it wasn't just you doing the vetting. There were other people doing it as well. It's
Yeah,
like
well,
a
I
bunch
said
of
that about the
comedians.
approval system. It was very tough.
Yeah.
You got you first of all, your group heads had a look at it. It was Terry and Vernon originally. Then John Salmon got a look at it, and then Frank Lowe got a look at it. Now, how many ads fell down at Frank Lowe? You'd be amazed at.
Really?
The number of times, the number of times he came down to us once, and he said, "Did you write this?" He said, "It starts off rather well, then it goes downhill fast, doesn't it? Can you do something else?" So we did, and got much better ad out of it. I can't remember the original script, what it was, but the second script went into D&AD. The film went in, and Ridley Scott memorably said it was up for a silver award actually. And Ridley Scott said, "This is the worst looking film I've ever seen in my life. We can't possibly give it a silver award." So they gave it to Wedding Photographer. We had them the same year, so we got that.
So you won anyway. Yeah. You mentioned the Frank Lowe's disemboweling knife, and you know, I mean, and there are a couple of references to, you know, scuffles and punch ups and, you know, things like that taking place. I mean, do you think that it was a different? That's what made it a different industry then, because people did vent.
Well, I don't remember any fights particularly, but I do remember heated arguments about the work.
Yeah.
You know, people were really passionate about it. And most of the conversations we had when we were at lunch or anything was all about the work.
Right.
I mean, you know, and Paul Smith became the very high up in Ogilvy until he retired. And I used to go up there and have lunch with him at Sea Container's house.
Yeah.
And he used to say, they don't talk about the ads. They talk about what wrap they're going to get at lunchtime or what mineral water they're getting. I mean, we didn't have 3 martini lunches, but we had the equivalent in other drinks.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, that carried on into my day as well. I mean, I was the generation afterwards, and you know, so you were my boss. You know, that was the whole thing. So we were out doing the same thing as you. But I mean, do you think that? I mean, that it was at the time. I mean, you know, you credit, you know, quite a few women in the book as well. But do you think it was a bit much of a boys' club back in those days?
I think it was a boys' club in a sense, but all the girls we had were blokes as well.
Right.
I mean, they really fitted in with it all, you know, and that they did, contrary to what that recent program on telly said about women being kept out of it. It was quite the opposite. A lot of women went through CDP, you know. There weren't that many. I mean, there are more men, but I mean, the whole time I worked there were about 3 or 4 women in the creative department, you know, of 30. So it was probably not enough of a proportion now, but they weren't excluded. If they were good, they were in.
Right, and that was the criteria.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you've got, you know, we've got some sort of good examples of kind of, you know, big creativity in the industry, but the yardstick still remains the same as the sort of back in the CDP days, you know, the D&AD pencil awards. And reading it, I was a bit surprised actually, and about how much emphasis was placed on awards in those days. I mean, you know, because it seems to me that the industry is accused these days of putting too much focus on, you know, on winning awards and nothing else. I mean, Why is it? Why do we place so much emphasis on D&AD awards?
Well, back then, I think they were a byproduct rather than emphasis.
Right.
Everybody, John Salmon particularly, was so business focused. You know, he said, don't, you know, he'd read things and he'd say, no, this won't sell the product. You've got to sell the product or whatever.
Right. That's what I'm driving at. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as you know, if you write an ad like any of the good ones, Hamlet sales were phenomenal. I mean, they became the best-selling cigar in Britain. You know, from writing funny ads that people liked.
Which still make me laugh. Just the mention of a Hamlet funny ad is still enough. But
Yeah.
And so the kind of the CDP brief. I mean, you've mentioned, you know, which I think is a fantastic. You put a great deal of focus on it, and sort of in the book, in terms of how the brief came down. And I mean, it reminded me of something that I discussed with Steve Harrison as well, talking about, you know, brevity being the, you know, sort of the the art of it. But Steve Harrison said something about what is that single-minded proposition, you know, that's going to solve the problem. And in your book, you write about how sometimes the brief was just a sentence or a couple of words or
one word.
Yeah, or just one word. I mean, is that the art of writing a brief?
Well, I think it helps because, Terry Lovelock had terrible trouble writing Heineken. You know, that's all documented because he had this one word. I mean, the thing about refreshment, it's any lager could have said it, you know, but they didn't. And I haven't put about the research. I've got the Heineken research that said don't run it. And if you look at that research, you'll find that they did several groups over age groups, and all the older drinkers said it was rubbish. But the youngest group they had, 18 to 25, loved the ads. And you think a clever researcher would have looked at that and said, don't worry about these guys. They're never going to drink lager. This is your future. And so it proved.
Wow. And I mean, but the idea of giving, a film director just a word or an ad director just a sentence to go with. I mean, is there a modern sort of version of one of those? I mean, is there anybody now that you would rate who has the ability to just take a sentence and flip it and just?
I don't really know. I mean, it's what always happens. You get a brief, and there's a single-minded proposition on it. Sometimes that's workable, and sometimes that's not.
Right.
And you look around the brief, and often buried somewhere else is what you can actually say, or you find a way of. I mean, one of the worst briefs I ever got was for Coleman's mustard. It said the single-minded proposition was it's the governor mustard. Couldn't do anything with it. It took ages to sort that out. And in the end, we did a campaign that's mentioned in the book actually, where these butlers forget to serve the mustard and commit suicide.
God.
And I wrote this line. I've written the book. Serve Coleman's mustard is the only decent thing to do. And Paul Weinberg actually made it better by saying, "Do the decent thing, serve Coleman's mustard." And that campaign worked then. But we couldn't work with that proposition.
What was it's the only decent thing to do? What was the analogy between? How was that linked to suicide?
Well, because you've got to do the decent thing. It is linked to suicide in popular culture in the past.
Doing the decent thing.
Yeah, John Salmon pushed us towards that. He said, "Well, no, this guy's got to commit suicide. You can't leave it there." He was as mad as that. He was a great thinker, very clever man, John Salmon, very clever. And he had this fantastic grounding in American advertising because he worked over in North America, you know.
Right.
And his work had been seen by Birnbach, who thought it was very good. He didn't work at Birnbach in New York. He worked at Birnbach in London.
And he was very protective of the culture at CDP and the way that you did things, wasn't he? That's the feeling that I definitely get through this book, was that he was very much a guardian of the brand.
But he was a very clever. I'll give you a story. It's not in there, but Paul and I got offered a job with more money at some crap agency, right? And we went to see John. Said, "Look, we've been offered this more money here." And he looked at the agency heading. And he said, "Yeah, are you really thinking of taking this job, or is it a ploy for more money?" I said, "I think it's a ploy for more money, John." He said, "Leave it with me. I'll see what I can do."
So he knew what the game was all along.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But very another time, Paul and I came back from a rather boozy lunch, and there was a memo saying that two people who were less senior than us had been appointed the creative floor fire monitors. And so we went to see John Sullivan and said, "This is ridiculous. We're the senior people here. Why have they got the job of fire monitor? It should be us." And so he said, "Yeah, fire monitor. Very good idea for you two to do it. Just one thing. What will we do in the afternoons?" That's how he dealt with us all. Really, with great wit, and he could actually. He's very good at turning work down. You know, didn't realise how shitty he'd been to you until you got back to your office. You know, a very nice turn of phrase, the way he described things.
Let you down gently, sort of thing.
Yeah. He didn't really ever give you a direction. If you turn something down, he'd say something or other, but you'd go back and think, well, I can't make that work. But he obviously wants something else. Let's do something else. You know?
Well, that's. I mean, I guess that's part of the art, isn't it? It's very difficult with creative people to actually, I mean, you have to be a certain type of creative person to be able to put your heart and soul into something and expect. I had this conversation with Martin Galton, and he was talking about, how he usually comes up with, and I've witnessed firsthand how he does this work. Is that he will come up with 5 or 6 treatments, and actually, they're all absolutely superb, but he'll expect 5 of them to die immediately. That's a unique personality that can live with that kind of, just throwing stuff away.
Yeah, I met him recently at Graham Watson's book launch.
Right.
He's got a pub in South London, I think he owns, or has something to do with. I don't know. He must have made a lot of money with BBH, wasn't he? He must have made a lot of money there.
He's a smart man, but again, we're talking about the idea of or a creative idea wouldn't die, and I love the fact that, and this is down to you as well in the book. You talk about. Reusing creative, the fact that it can reside, it can sit in your desk drawer for years and then come up. And there was a couple of stories that you reference in it. One of them is the happiness, the squeaky earring for the VW, and the Carling Black Label.
Yeah, which they wrote for milk.
Yeah, I bet he drinks milk. I mean, just Carling Black Label definitely was the winner. But the one that brought back all the nostalgia, that gave me my Hooskadoo moment, was the beach telescope one, which was you, right?
Yeah,
that was down to you, and that sat in your drawer for ages. I mean, just take us through how that happened.
Right. Well, what happened was that we had to. The Hamlet films were done one of two ways. Either somebody thought of an idea and put it forward, and if they liked it, they went ahead with it, or you were given a brief to do it if they needed a film. We were given a brief to do a film, and this was about 3 months into our tenure there, and we did these two scripts. One was the Venus de Milo script, which we didn't really do. We did a sculptor, and it was Vernon Howe said, "Why don't you make it the Venus de Milo? It'd be funnier." A lot of that happened, by the way. People made things better all the time, suggesting stuff, But the other one we did on our own, without any help. And Jeff Seymour was the creative director that day because John Summer was on holiday. And he said that the beach telescope one is off strategy. Now, I couldn't work that out. So he said, "How many do you need?" Well, so we need one. We'll do the other one. So we did Venus de Milo back in 1974-3. And then when the brief came for the second one, that was 1980, we were so snowed under with work. We really were. And I think Paul or me said, "What about that the beach telescope idea? We've still got that." So I fished it out.
Just go through the premise. Just explain the premise of the advert for those that don't know.
Consolation is what the Hamlet commercials are all about. So if you do one word brief, it'd be consolation.
Okay.
Yeah. But we really liked the script, so we had it retyped for the modern date on it, and put it through. And it flew through straight into D&AD.
And so this was a guy who was using a beach telescope, one of the ones that you find on the pier and stuff like that.
Put money in, yeah.
And he was watching, because there's
he saw a girl disrobing,
right, and
he picks up on her, so he scans along and finds this girl disrobing, and then just at the point where it gets to the very interesting bit, the money runs out.
and the shutter comes down.
And he can't find any coins, so he smokes a Hamlet. And so it's a very nice little film. Paul Wayland shot it.
It's a beautifully simple advert, but as I say,
Yeah.
it got confined to to a deep dark place in my brain until I read about it in the book, and I was like, oh my god, yeah, because I remember that when that came out, it was just hilarious. I mean, there was something about the timing of it, the sound. It was when the music kicks in. It was just all absolutely perfect. It was a genius advert.
Yeah, we were pleased with it when we did it, and we were lucky with the weather. I mean, it was done in England in August. I can't remember what. And with that day was a beautiful day, in amongst a load of crap. So we were really lucky with the weather. And we shot it down in Dorset. I don't know why we did it in Dorset, but we did.
But like you say, I mean, this all came about because it had been sitting in a drawer for a while, and you just decided to reuse it and to give it a new home. I mean, is there ever such a thing as a fresh idea? I mean, aren't they all just kind of recycled in some way, shape, or form? Aren't they?
Well, fresh ideas are the first time you think about it. I mean, ask what a fresh idea is. It's an idea you've never seen before, I think, but you often are I mean, there's lots of stories I could tell you about looking at something. We had to do an ad once with a picture of Peter Sellers holding an Olympus camera. It was with another team, and they failed to do the ad, but they had the photograph. So John Summer, we always got lumbered with this stuff. John Summer said, "Can you turn this into an ad?" And we had no idea how to do it until we remembered a Volkswagen ad that showed a Volkswagen station wagon with a Y-shaped brown paper parcel, and the headline said, "What is it?" And the first bit of copy says, "Glad you asked. It's a Volkswagen station wagon." We did exactly that technique. We put a headline on, no prizes for guessing the name. First line said, "It's an Olympus OM10." So we did exactly that technique. So you do actually
Borrow,
steal stuff and borrow. But I mean, I don't think many people would know that's how it got there. But we did that so many times. You think, well, we could do it like that, couldn't we? I mean, it's how songwriting's done. They think, oh, I can do it a bit like this. And I think ad creation songs are very similar in the way that they're done. You come in with bits and pieces sometimes, like John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and put it together, or one of you has an idea and the other one builds on it, or has the whole thing already written. One of you. I think it's very similar.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I've in conversations I've had with Martin Galton. I mean, I've referred to his business as sort of like a super group, a 3-man super group, because I think that there are the creative comes about because of through the same purpose, through the same methods of as you do writing a piece of music and stuff.
Yeah.
But so as far as the actual commercials themselves are concerned, and I come at this from a position of relative ignorance, but when I worked in advertising agencies, I mean, any TV adverts were very carefully kind of storyboarded out, and and sort of very tightly managed on the way through. But as you say in the book here, I mean, there were lots of directors, or there were a few directors that you work with that basically the idea was just coming straight off a script. There was no storyboard to that. Why did you do that?
Well, if you take the wedding photographer commercial, why would you storyboard it? It's obvious what you're going to shoot. You don't need to draw a little picture of the photographer, and you don't need it. If you've got a director like Alan Parker, he knows instinctively what shots he needs to edit it. He finished filming that film about 2:30 in the afternoon. I mean, I didn't know what to do with myself after that, so I went home. but he kind of. But some you do. I mean, if you take Hugh Hudson with his big production stuff, they were storyboarded because they needed to be. I think
right.
because it's not a story that you're filming; it's a kind of series of shots, if you like. So they were they were storyboarded. He storyboarded. The Benson and Hedges film. Likewise with Strada, that was effectively storyboarded because John Salmon sent Paul Wayland and David Horry over to look at the factory in Turin. Though Paul had already seen another car being built by robots on telly.
It's a great story.
Yeah. And they went over there, and Horry took all these Polaroid pictures of all the stages of manufacture. I remember him coming back on a big piece of that board that used to put ad concepts on, putting them all in order. So it was effectively a storyboard that Hugh Hudson then shot.
Right.
So And Ridley always did storyboards, by the way. That was
Okay.
he had his son Jake, I think it was, or Luke. He had two sons. I don't know which one did it. He used to always do a storyboard, Ridley, but I never worked with Ridley, so I didn't. But I watched people work with him, and I saw what happened. He did a lot of early Collett's commercials that were just, dialogue commercials, believe it or not.
Right.
He did a fabulous film called Underground, which is a still of in the book with Terry Thomas and
Yes. Yeah.
Eric Sykes, which is very. I remember watching that at the cinema and laughing out loud. That was before I got to Collett. But Ridley did a lot of stuff. And one day we were talking to him, and we saw him a little bit, although we didn't work with him. We said to him, Ridley, that commercial you just shot is terrible. Why did you do it? It looks beautiful, but it's a terrible. He said, well, there was a crane shot in it I wanted to do. And I just thought I want to do that shot, so because I'd never done it. And I learned from that, because what you have to realise is that sometimes you get stuff to do and you think, is there something in this for me that I need?
Right.
An experience of some sort or something like that. And it's always worth remembering that story, I think.
That is fantastic. So, I mean, it was just basically wanting to do the commercial because it allowed him to do something that he needed to do for his own personal growth.
A case in point, I was doing this work for Adrian Holmes at Lowe on the launch of Flora Proactive, which is a kind of cholesterol lowering margarine. And we kept doing I was working with John Foster at the time, Frosty, and we kept doing these scripts. And then the account lady came up and said, I don't think they want anything creative. They want a testimonial film. So I said, well, I don't really like doing testimonials. She said, I think you will when you hear where it is. I said, where is it? She said, Australia. I said, I'll do it.
I'm there.
Anyway, Frosty was really upset about this. He said, oh, no, I don't think we should be doing this. I said, Frosty, I'm going to ask you one question based on this Ridley Scott story. One question. Have you ever been to Australia? No. Would you like to go? Yes, that's why we're doing it. It turned out to be, for what it was a decent enough film. It was very successful, but it wasn't creative in the sense, but it's a nice little bit of work, decent piece of, bread and butter work.
Yeah, but I mean, it allowed you to. I mean, this, it's the whole sort of, one thing leads to another and allows you to opens up doors in, in places you never expected, sort of thing.
Yeah, it was a great experience actually doing it. I mean, as much for the travel. I mean, as Paul Collis says when I'm writing about Wicker, he said we didn't get any gongs out of it, but we got to go to a lot of nice places, and that's the same thing. You get an experience that you wouldn't normally have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it just a bit earlier, but I wanted to focus on as well. I'll ask you about the approval system.
Right. Yeah.
Because I thought it's a standout thing that you don't really hear about much. And I mean, you've obviously touched on it in terms of it, being like a sort of a way of making sure that an idea was good. But I mean, what were the benefits of that approval system? Because and just explain what was the
one of the major benefits was selling it to the client,
right? Because
they could turn the ad around and show the client, look, this has been signed by these people. These people really know what they're doing. I really recommend you do this, and often they would. Or you could get the Frank Lowe approach. I've written this up as a story, but it's a good story. Frank Lowe was presenting a full-page campaign of some sort, and there was an ad there. Junior client pipes up and says, "What would that be like as a half page?" So Frank broke the ad in half and said, "Which half do you want?"
Fantastic. I mean, that is as brutal as it can get, and I mean that is almost. Again, that comes back to the John Salmon thing as well, isn't it? It's that, you are being paid to do a job. You are professionals. You know how to do the job properly. And so just leave it to you and you'll come up with the right solution. Yeah,
I mean, it's I also wonder about research. I think research is very useful before you write something to find out attitudes and, what the market's like and all that kind of thing. But the last thing you should do with research is judge advertising with it, because how does a bunch of people in the street know what they're looking at? Right. They don't, do they? Whereas if you showed it to a bunch of advertising professionals, they'd look and say, no, I don't think this is good enough, or this is very good, we should do it.
What you're basically saying is that the idea is the thing that carries it through, and the fact that you've got a bunch of experts who are, which is it's very similar to the what we were just talking about in terms of awards, you've got
Yeah.
a peer group approval system taking place,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that means it's good.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't get away with it. I mean, with Frank, you could never get away with anything. He was always of course, what happened with Frank, which is not widely known, but Dave Dyer's touched on this somewhere or other, I think, is that he used to send all the scripts to Alan Park and ask him what he thought of them.
Right. Okay.
And then another time, we were writing a script for these Jif Squeezy Lemons. We were doing an ad for that, and John Kelly and John O'Driscoll were up at Ladbroke Grove filming Daily Express commercials featuring the Howard Hughes book. And I phoned up John Salmon with the script we'd written and read it to him. He said, "Yeah, that's good. Make sure Frank sees it." He says he's up at Ladbroke Grove on the film. So we drove up to Ladbroke Grove and showed it to Frank. And Frank said, "Yeah, very nice. Would you like Alan to film this?" So that would be good. It's as easy as that, you know. You
Wow.
get the best commercials director in London doing it, you know.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. And one thing I have to mention here, and talking about the way that you have put this book together. And my version is incredibly dog-eared by now because I've got lots of pages turned down for things I wanted to talk to you about. But every chapter, every commercial you mention or you write about, you put, and it's it's a very simple little touch, but it's a great idea. The QR code.
Yeah, that was David Hughes, the designer, who understood that.
It's a
And we've got
superb
a
little
obvious
idea.
channel that we can so you can just put your phone on it and see the commercial. It's so obvious, isn't it? I mean, I've seen it used subsequently in papers and things. You know, watch the video, do this. But that was David Hughes. He's a very talented designer whom I work with all the time.
Right.
He can do digital and everything. You know, he's an art director, designer, understands tech,
It's
and
a sweet touch.
he knew that technique existed, so we put it in. You
It's
know,
a very, very sweet touch. And so, you know, the point is that you buy the book and you can then use your phone and look at the exact commercial that you're talking about rather than trying to dig it out on YouTube and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a genius, inspired idea. Absolutely fantastic.
yeah. Well, it's not my idea, but David's, and I said, yeah, I know a good idea when I see it. That's one of the things I can do.
There you go.
Oh yeah, that's good.
You are your own approval system. So
yeah, that's
fantastic. Now, also in the book as well, you pay tribute to a load of notable clients. You got Anthony Simons Gooding, Robert Wallace, Barry Taylor. There's a huge list of people on there. What makes a standout client?
Right, it's in the book. I'm going to have to read it out because I can never get it right. I've got it. Page 100, right? It's Leo Burnett, founder of the agency that still bears his name, said any fool can write a bad ad, but it takes a real genius to keep his hands off a good one. Yeah. So those clients were the real geniuses, as I say, because they kept their... Barry Taylor was particularly good. He never altered one word of anything we wrote, not one word.
Again, would just accept you for being the experts, basically.
And he's been in touch with me. An amazing number of people from the past have got in touch with me. He's one of them.
Right.
Saying how he felt honoured that I've been so nice about him, you know, both in the David Bailey chapter and in that little bit there.
Well,
you know.
I mean, I think it's, you know, we've had this question plenty of time on the show, and the fact that clients had a habit of being able of wanting to trust experts and do their job. Yeah. And I mean, do you think that you still have that kind of relationship going on between clients and agencies, or that within every client there's a sort of a creative trying to get out who thinks that they can make their own commercials?
Well, I haven't really. I deal directly with companies now, not through an agency, but generally speaking, the people I work for know what I do and let me do it. You know, so I don't really have some of the people are terrible. You know, there was a client who we had a script. It was for Poland, believe it or not, and there's a girl eating a Galaxy chocolate bar, and she's at a desk, and she gets up and walks to the window, opens the bar, and you get a shot from outside the window of her eating the thing or whatever. And this client said, "I've just timed this. To walk from this table to the window is going to take 4 seconds. That's far too long, isn't it? How are you going?" So no, you don't film the go to the. You just get her moving, and then you cut to her moving to the window. It's called an action cut, and your head just accepts it. Right. Knows exactly what it's got. So, and you have to explain these things in great detail, you know, to these people. You think, let me do it. I know what I'm doing here.
Right.
You know, I mean, that was but I have met some very. I mean, working on Mars was interesting because the clients there I met, three of them in particular, I remember well, were incredibly bright and very good. Although they had this rather dull advertising, which was gradually made better, they were very, very nice people and very good, and I had great admiration for them for their intellects, really. I think
And the
because it's too
ability
easy to. There are very stupid ones as well, but these three, Chris Hardy, Josh Leish, and Tim Ledyard, were brilliant people to work with. And we gradually made the work better. You know, we didn't go, we evolved it. We didn't revolve it, if you're revolution.
step
We just
change.
evolved.
Yeah.
And they got to know us, and they started to trust us, you know.
That is a big part of it, because a lot of the adverts that you write about here were based on relationships where everybody understood whose role was what, you know, in the relationship.
Yeah. I mean, there's a story told about, there's an account man called Ian Schooler, and the client at Metropolitan Bank, Julian Bradley, rang him up one day, and John Salmon had written a piece of copy, and Bradley was trying to change one word in the copy. And Ian Schooler argued with him for ages and ages and ages. And in the end, the guy gave in and put the phone down. And he said to the bloke who told me this story, was with him, said, yeah, of course, his word is a better word, but you let them change one thing and they'll start changing everything. So you can't let them do it.
His word is a better word. He still knew that it was a better word.
Do you know anything about, this is off the point, but
Good.
Tony Kaye, right? It was another
Yeah.
ex-Collett. Yeah. He made this film called American History X with Edward Norton, and Edward Norton had final say on the cut. And Tony did all this cutting and everything, and got really annoyed because Edward Norton was going to recut it. And he got a Buddhist monk and a rabbi and Catholic priest to go and mediate at the film company with the producers. Didn't work. And Paul Smith was doing some work with him at Ogilvy with Tony. And he said to Tony, what was his edit like? He said, oh, it's better than mine.
Oh, fantastic. And that was a great movie as well. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it was good.
Movie.
Very good movie, yeah.
Very good.
But, I mean, can you imagine, the other thing you kind of wanted to know, I think, about was there's not a sense of anarchy, but you said at some point you wanted to know what I would have done if it hadn't been advertising.
Sure.
The only way to answer that question is for me to look around the CDP Craig department in the mid-70s and look at everybody and think, what would these people ever be able to do if they didn't do this? Nothing.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so that's my answer to that.
So, do you think? Okay, well, we can jump to it, but I mean, you know, do you think that there were a lot of people at the time? I mean, I remember Paul Grubb telling me that, you know, he was on a building site in Sheffield, you know, before he came to London and worked with Dave Trott, and you know, there were lots of examples of people coming from other places, but I mean, you know, that there were people working in advertising agencies that wouldn't have got a job anywhere else.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. I mean, I started in advertising when I was 16, so I was never going to be doing anything else if I had a successful career, which luckily I did. But I used to look at people, what would Waldy have done if he hadn't done that? I mean, he was as mad as a hatter. And even John Salmon, you think, what would he be doing if he wasn't doing this,
Right.
you know? Yeah, because he's just so eccentrically minded. Ron Collins would be unemployable or anything else. Any number of people I could mention, you know, wouldn't be able to do anything else.
No.
I mean, the only thing about the difference between the writers and the art directors, most of the art directors have been to art school. And as Dave Trotter said, that art school is good because normal further education teaches you what to think, not how to think. Art school teaches you how to think.
Right. Yes.
You know, to make and I think that's why a lot of art directors are brilliant creative people, you know, because they've been to art school and they kind of done all this weird stuff there. And they bring something to the. I mean, it's interesting is sitting in a room with somebody doing stuff. I think Adrian Holmes said that you get a third person into the room who's cleverer than both the sum of the parts, if you like, and it's true.
Wow, that Peter Suter said exactly the same thing. You know, he said that you know you get two you know, because we were talking about double acts basically in the world of advertising, and he said that the two personalities make a third person.
Yeah, who's much cleverer than those two, you know.
And so into the world of political correctness and. You know, I know that it's
virtue signaling and all that.
the thing that interested me was that obviously we were talking, you know, there's a lot of, you talk about classic cigarette advertising, cigar advertising, and, you know, things that might have been considered to be slightly politically incorrect. I mean, is it an advertising agency's role to kind of to say whether they like things or agree with working with clients on moral grounds? Or, you know, is this something that we should learn from the tobacco industry, which is just, you know, you've got to go with it?
I think every agency is perfectly entitled to work with whom they wish to work with and not work with those they don't. David Abbott, because his father died of lung cancer,
right,
always said we're never going to do any tobacco advertising here. And you respect him for that. You think that's fine. That's up to him. But Collett started off. I mean, it was Pearce used to call it a booze, fags, and fashion agency at one point. So. But I mean, if it was, I mean, look at the pleasure that I've never smoked a cigarette or anything in my life, but the pleasure that those ads gave me and they gave members of the public, it was, you know, maybe they were making up for something. In terms of political correctness, I think that's affecting a lot today. I mean, you look at casting in commercials and you see inappropriate proportions of ethnic people in them, which doesn't exist, you know. And if you get outside Islington, where I live, or somewhere like this, and get into the real world, everybody thinks it's mad. Right. They can't understand it. Back in 1970, I was doing an ad for the post office with Paul, and we wanted to put a black postman in it, and they wouldn't let us. We said, but a lot of postmen are black. It really will work. They wouldn't let us. They said, no, you can't. It's got to be white. So I'm not against it. I just think it needs to be appropriate. I mean, somebody said about the England football team, the girls one, that it wasn't very diverse, but actually, if you look at the population of Britain in terms of Asian and black people, it's about 18%. They had 22 girls squad, and 2 of them were black. So it basically represented the country in terms of proportions.
But are we overemphasizing the need to be representative and to be seen to be taking the moral high ground? Are we sacrificing that in terms of the potential sales loss, you know, that we?
I don't know whether you lose sales because of it, but I mean, I did some films a little while ago, and it was for the Bar Association. It's not to do with drink; that's the lawyers. And they wanted diversity, and I quite agree with it. So I did one film that was the focus of which was football, and I cast a black couple. You know, I thought that this does work. You look at the people who go to the Arsenal; it's very representative. Right. You know, a black guy doing it. And then I cast an Asian person, and I cast white people. So different films to put them in, just according to what I thought worked with the subject matter. For football, because of what I see when I get out there when the matches are, I thought that works. You know, right. He's going to want to know what the football results are.
If you could sum up, and you spoke to somebody who'd never understood what advertising is all about. I mean, given all your experience, what is the single art of great advertising? Persuasion.
Bill Bernbach's quote's good on this. You know, advertising isn't a science; it's an art. Persuasion, because it's persuasion, it's an art. It really is persuasion, persuading people by any means at your disposal, whether it's humour or what, to like your product and buy it. So therefore, what qualifications make up a great advertising industry? Well, the biggest one is curiosity. Okay. Asking questions of people, of the product, and all the rest of it. You also need intelligence and you need imagination, but curiosity is the main. When I used to interview people, I tried to see how curious they were, because it doesn't matter which bit of the ad business you're in, it's really important. Because when for example Doyle Dane went over to Wolfsburg, they took the account director with him, and he came back and he talked to the creative team, Helmut Krohn, Julian Koenig, and said, "There's 6 things here we should do the ads on," and that was longevity and all, you know, the various things, the inspection program, the fact the engine's in the back and we explain why it's there, and so on. Air cooled, no need for any water, you won't boil over. He said we should do the ads about these things, and that's because he was curious enough to go there and ask the questions and look at what they were doing. So curiosity covers a wide area, but it's very, very important. The most important thing, curiosity. That's where it all comes from. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was always told off when I was a kid for asking too many questions, but it stood me in good stead later on. Well, I mean, it seems to be the art of
of working with clients is to keep asking why, or
Yeah.
who or how. Is that you always seem to get a better answer, or get deeper if you can ask those sorts of questions. But I mean, given the fact that you had radio, TV, cinema, and magazines, journals, printed. Now we've got so many different
channels,
mediums, God knows what. I mean, do you think it was easier then to do something that you thought, well, there's only a certain type of person who's going to be commuting down and is going to see this poster, whereas now we have to come up with an idea that maybe manifests in on Facebook as a social media post, or as an outdoor advertisement, or as a TV ad, or something else like that? Is it harder now to try and pinpoint who the end user is?
This is all a bit technical for me, but what I do think is a lot of this stuff. If I was looking at YouTube earlier, and you get ads, skip ad after 5 seconds, which of course everybody does.
Sure.
But so what they do, they front load the ad with a load of stuff you don't want to know about. They don't take the time to make it something interesting. Now, whether that would work, I don't know. I mean, if I were doing an ad for YouTube, I would try and make it interesting or funny or whatever, so that people would keep watching it. But whether they would is another matter, because it's so easy to get rid of them.
It's a fascinating, I had this conversation with Niels Leonard as well at Uncommon. He was talking about the skip button. I've had some experience of working sort of with YouTubers and vloggers and stuff like that, and the way that they build their creative is very, very different from anything I've seen before, in terms of exactly like you say, everything is front loaded. So this is all to avoid people skipping in the first 5 to 10 seconds of anything happening. So it's a challenge creatively, isn't it? And I'm sure it's something that, I mean, have you had anything like that to deal with, or would you like to do something?
I haven't. No, I'm kind of. If I were to approach it, I mean, the trouble is, it's the medium is the problem, because you can get rid of it straight away. So they all front load them, as I said, and so that's not very interesting usually. It's not. It's. You think, oh God, what's this? And it's usually something. I don't know how they choose what you see either, because it's always irrelevant to me.
Well, okay, let me reverse that question then. Back in the day, in the 1970s, if there was a skip ad button, do you think people would have used it then?
They may well have done. I don't know, but the ads were more interesting and funnier. So they might. I mean, when you've got a good ad, people will watch it over and over and over and over. They won't get rid of it. They say, "Oh, this one's good. Have a look at it." I don't know. I mean, now going to terrestrial TV, the ad breaks are 4 minutes long, right? And that is a real mistake, because you can do a hell of a lot in 4 minutes. You can go to the loo, wash your hands, and it's still going on. I've actually this morning I made coffee in 4 minutes.
Sure.
And
especially with fast boil kettles these days.
Kettle boils, I can't hear it, so it's fine. But as I wrote somewhere once, if you're Roger Bannister, you can run a mile, which is what most people do when they see the ads come on.
God, I'm never going to forget that. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. What a genius thing. So, I mean, what are you saying? Are you saying that the 4 minute commercial break is too long?
Yeah,
right.
I think it's shooting itself in the foot. When it was 2 minutes, you kind of, it's not so bad. But when it's 4 minutes, it's interminable. And you watch stuff and you think, I mean, a lot of people I know stop watching things on ITV because the ad breaks are so long, or they record them and cut them, run through the ad breaks.
Right.
So if there's two programs competing, the BBC one you watch live, the ITV one you record, watch it back, get rid of the ads. I mean, it's a terrible thing for me to say, isn't it? I'm a living doing it, but
that's, I mean, that is, and this is the point, is that we are overfilling, everybody's tolerance for advertising. I mean, as John Hegarty said, talking about the Apple's 1984 advert, only came on TV once, and we're still talking about it now.
Yeah, great ad. I was down at Shepperton when he shot that, and there were all these weird people walking around. I thought, what is this? All those guys sitting in rows watching the screen. They're all in the canteen and everything. You think, well, who are these people?
Perfect. And of course, you mentioned one of your own. I'm going to have to try and find it now. But and it was the one ad that I've never seen.
Okay.
The McEwen's Lager one.
You've never seen that?
Never seen that one before.
It ran in Scotland. That's why.
That's why, because I wasn't Scottish.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, that in itself used a weird cast of people, didn't it? I mean, it was a very, very odd setup, that one.
Yeah, it took 6 days to film it, and that was doing simultaneous filming with two lighting cameramen, and we were so busy at the time. I actually left that shoot, left Paul there, and did another shoot for another McEwen William Younger product somewhere else with John O'Driscoll directing it. So it was we're just turning over built the whole time. We're so busy. That client, by the way, Tony McGrath, who's in the picture with the footballs. He was a great bloke.
Yeah.
A very clever bloke. Very good bloke to know. When the thing about beer clients is they've got they're good personalities because it goes with the territory. You know, convivial is the word I'm looking for. They're very convivial.
That's a great word. Great word. So, I mean, of all of these people that you've worked with in your who goes? What's your dinner party brag? What's the person you say that you always pull out? That's like, okay, I'm going to play this card now.
Sir Alan Parker.
Okay.
I thought very hard about this. It's Alan. Alan was a polymath. I had 2 periods where I knew him. One where he was working with me, making commercials. Then he went off to Hollywood. And then when he came back, through Tim Lindsay and me being at a president's dinner at D&AD, where he turned up, I got to know him again. In fact, it was priceless. He walked up these steps in this restaurant we were in, and I was with John Hegarty because I went to school with John Hegarty, so we sort of got that. But he was much higher up than me, of course. Head boy, wouldn't he be? And anyway, I was with John Hegarty, and Alan came up the steps, and he said hello to John. He said hello to somebody else, and he turned to me, and I said, My name's Mike Everett. You used to make commercials for me. He said, I know who the fuck you are. Anyway, subsequently, Paul and me used to have lunch with him like once every month or so at the Chelsea Arts Club. And he used to nominate a guest, so we get somebody along. Hugh Hudson was one once and things like that. Wow. John Salmon, Frank Lowe.
Oh my God.
And so we got to know him quite well. So, but he was very clever. He can write books. He can write screenplays. He can make commercials very well. He can make films. He can draw. He's an artist, or was an artist. You know, so you just think, and he's incredibly clever. Incredibly clever. You know, he was impressive beyond. You know, when he talked to you about stuff, he told us loads of stories that can't be repeated because we'll all get sued. But about famous people. But one we probably can repeat is when they were doing Evita. They're at Whitfield Street in London, behind where Saatchi's used to be, and they were in a studio there recording all the stuff for Evita for the film. Right. And every day, Alan and the engineer and they used to go down the road. There's a terrible old pub. It's been spruced up now called the Hope in Whitfield Street. Terrible old boozer. Right. Used to go down there and have lunch and come back. And they used to say to Madonna, "Do you want to come?" And she'd say, "No, because everybody will mob it. It would be terrible." In the end, she did go. And nobody paid a blind bit of notice at her. So that was good. All those stories from Alan were really, really nice, you know.
So what's coming up for you now? I mean, what are you looking forward to?
Not a lot, really. I mean, I look forward to every day, actually. I look forward to my walk. I look forward to, you know, what work I've got to do. You know, I'm working on a big project to do with a training course. At the moment, things like that. I just like doing
You're
things.
Staying creative and still kicking.
And then if I'm not working for somebody for money, I'll go back and do a bit of writing and put it somewhere, like I did with this book, and eventually it might surface in some way. You know.
So do you find that your creativity comes out in all sorts of different things? I mean, do you paint, draw, and do all those sorts of things as well?
No, I'm useless. I mean, everybody I know can do other stuff, you know, and you think, oh, this is all I can do, right? I just really I like reading. And reading is the best training for writing, by the way. Reading stuff.
There you go, gem.
Yeah, I like reading, and I generally read factual books. I like authors like Ben McIntyre and people like that. So it's historically based stuff I like to read. Okay. I like to read about anything I'll read anything that's kind of about anything really. I think, oh, this is interesting. I better read about this.
Do you read biographies? Do you like biographies and stuff?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, very much. Yeah, I've read all Churchill's Second World War books.
Right.
Which he cheats a bit really, because he's got a lot of stuff that he just pulls out of his archive. He said, "I sent this message to President Roosevelt," and he just puts that in the book. You think, this is really lazy. Couldn't he write this out again somehow?
All right. Okay. So we are coming into the final furlong now, and
Okay.
the final 3 questions here. We got show and tell, which I'm fascinated to know what you're going to pull out for this. So, an object of significance.
Right. I've thought about this.
Go on.
This is the burning house question, isn't it?
Well, kind of. Yeah. I don't
Okay.
know
Well,
what it is at the moment.
I tell you what.
Go on.
I wouldn't go back in the burning house because objects can be replaced, and I can't.
There you go.
I wouldn't take the risk.
There you go.
That's
So, but what do you have? You got an object that you cherish?
No, but probably this MacBook, because it's got so much on it I need.
You're the second one that said that. Second creative that said, "Oh, all my ideas are on here."
Yeah, no, I've tried. I wouldn't have to go back in because this would go out with me in the first place.
Well, there you go. It's always glued to your side.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And a book you'd recommend that we could read?
Well, there's okay. A couple of books that I like. I'll just do a couple, but not the choice. The choice might be quite surprising when you see it. I recommend Chronicles by Bob Dylan, which is a fabulous book.
Okay, good. I'm with you. All right.
Okay, one of the best books I've ever read. There's another nice book written by Ian Banks called Espadare Street, which is a story of a rock star who's very rich, and he's got 2 friends. One's very young and one's very old. Neither of those 2 know who he is. But what I'm going to choose is 22 books.
Okay.
These books here by Patrick O'Brien are stunning. There's 22 of them.
Patrick O'Brien, Master and Commander.
But there's another 21. Peter Mayle thought they were the best books he'd ever read.
Right.
And Frank Lowe's got them all in his bookcase. I mean, and has read them as well. And I read them. I started reading them at the end of 2015, and I just binge read them until I'd read the lot. They cover a sea captain and his doctor during the Napoleonic era.
Oh, okay.
So the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century. They're fascinating because the detail. He's a great writer. He is a biographer of Picasso. He lived in the village that Picasso lived in, down in wherever it was, Spain or somewhere.
Right.
And he's a stunning storyteller. I think if you want to occupy yourself for a couple of months reading books, read these. The film was made of it is great. Peter Weir's film, which is basically they've read every book and taken bits out of each of the books and put it in one story.
One, wasn't it?
Russell Crowe. It's a fabulous film, really good film, really well made. And if you watch on YouTube the making of the film, the detail that went into it, where they sort of they found this ship for sale in Holland or something, and so he went over to wherever the film company says, and they talked to this bloke Patrick O'Brien, and the film company said, "Yeah, we better buy that ship. We're going to need it, aren't we?" And then they realised they needed 2 ships, so they had to build another one. It's just very fascinating stuff. I mean, it's a great film, actually. I first watched it on a plane going to Rio de Janeiro or somewhere like that when I was travelling around the world with Lowe. And I watched it on the small screen, and even there it works, But if you get a DVD of it and watch it on the big screen, it's fantastic.
Well, we've talked about all sorts of stories that go behind the works of art. And I mean, this, that's the premise of the book. And you've just told another one there about the story behind Master and Commander. Now, we're going to do the same thing here with your music choice, because I asked you to come up with a piece of walk-off music, and it's not really great walk-off music, but it's a great piece of music, and the story behind it is almost as interesting or as fascinating as the piece of music itself. So, first of all, the piece of music, and then we'll talk about it.
Day in the Life
from the Beatles.
Yeah.
Off Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
Now,
and
go on.
The story is 2 songs put into one, isn't it? And there's so many backstories to it, like John Lennon saying, "I want to sound like the end of the world," and all this kind of stuff. I mean, when I first heard that track in 1967, I think it was, June the 1st, 1967, I bought it at the record shop around the corner, put it on my filing cabinet. I was in production or something at the time, and took it home and played it. I couldn't believe it when I heard that track. I thought, this is mind-blowing. I've never heard anything since that it's quite got the power. I mean, I did consider putting the Hamlet music on the end, or the Hovis music. But I just thought this is so final, and you wanted end music. There it is.
I watched recently, or a while ago now, the Abbey Road Studios documentary, which is
The Peter Jackson
if
thing.
If these walls could talk, which is
Oh no, I haven't seen that. No, okay, yeah,
and they talk about the making of Sergeant Pepper's in there, all right?
yeah,
And the fact that part of the art of how that album came about was the fact that it was hands off. They let the creatives, and this comes back to what we were talking about. They let the creative people be creative and do their thing. Saw Paul McCartney explaining recently how, that they did the sliding scales. That happens twice in that.
yeah.
piece.
Well, they had to go from the highest note to the lowest note, or something like
Lowest
that.
note
Didn't
to
they?
the highest note. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But how they did that was just extraordinary.
And they asked all the orchestra to turn up in evening dress, didn't they?
That's right.
Things like that.
But it just there was something about the way that album stood for everything that is creative. I think is and for that track is essentially because it wasn't a piece of music, was it? I mean, if you look at it as a single, it doesn't work because there's no beginning, middle, and an end to it. It's just a rambling piece of genius.
Yeah, I mean one of the great things is Ringo's drum fills in it. Which somebody said to me once. That's like a classical drummer would do on a classical piece, and it is performed by classical orchestras quite often.
Right,
that song,
it's beautiful.
because it's got some fantastic vibe to it, hasn't it?
Well, we are we're gonna end on the crescendo at the sort of at the end of the song as well, because what was that, 6 pianos or something they put together?
Yeah, I think I thought it's a number of piano. Ringo, they're all different people playing. George Martin, everybody just doing that one chord. They did it originally they wanted to do a sort of hum thing, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that didn't work. So because you've got that fantastic crescendo, you just need something at the end of it, don't you, to finish it off? And they kept turning up the gain. That's why it lasts so long.
I know it goes. I didn't realise until I was looking at it. I said, "There's still another 20 seconds to play on the end of this."
Yeah,
and it's just incredible.
And you can hear all sorts of stuff going on during that, with things, sort of noises and things that shouldn't be there. And it's a fantastic piece of work. I mean, the fact that George Martin in one of his books said he came in and started singing the verses, the first 2 verses, I think, and he said the hairs on the back of my neck was standing up, and then they needed they had that big bit in the middle to fill up. And Phil McCartney says, "I've got this song bung in there." and then he did that twice because he went back to George Martin and said, I think I can sing that better. Can we do it again? That's this was a very much Collett thing. I think we can do this better. Should we try it again? I mean, that's what you do, isn't it? You should think I can, because when you've not done your best, you think, no, I want to do this better.
And that's a beautiful way to end this. That's an absolutely perfect place to leave the conversation. But Mike, thank you so much. I really do. Okay. I really appreciate you putting the time aside and working with me on this, because I know it's sort of taking you slightly out of your comfort zone, and definitely me out of my comfort zone. I feel like I've learned so much from you. I've really, really enjoyed the book. But one of the gratifying things about it is the non-advertising people who've read it who like it. It's extraordinary. It's called Methods of the Madmen, and it's available from all good booksellers. But if you don't know anything about advertising, then this is probably one of the best places to start, because it gives you a great kind of idea of how one of Britain's most successful agencies sort of started and created what is an industry that is, to most of us that love it the most, is there's nothing to match it, really, is there? No. I can't even. I had such a great life there, and subsequently, I can't believe my luck, actually. Well, I think that's just fantastic. And so, in deference to the title at the very start, Mike Everett, who's he? We all know who you are now. Thank you so much, Mike. Really been great, and I hope I get to talk to you again soon. Yeah, me too. Good to talk to you. Mike, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed that chat. What an education and what an amazing career. Having just gone through my own advertising creative process, I fully appreciate Mike's point of view about clients allowing agencies to do the job they're paid for. As clients, we need to learn to get out of the way of superior creative brains. Leo Burnett's quote, "I have learned that any fool can write a bad ad, but it takes a real genius to keep his hands off a good one," really sits at the heart of what we acknowledge as the problem with a lot of advertising these days. The truly creative agencies that consistently win business often attract clients that understand their role in the process, clients that let the experts do the work. We all like to think that we're imaginative in some way, and that's okay, but we're not always creative in a way that resonates with millions of people at any one time. That takes a very special talent. There's no single definition of creativity, and therein lies the challenge. The most inventive ad is not necessarily the best one, and just being creative for the sake of it often does more harm than good. As Mike said, a creative mind is a curious mind. They understand psychology and human behaviour on a different frequency to most of us. What we think is funny might be funny to us, but is it funny to millions of other people? The brains behind many of the world's famous adverts are pushing the limits of their curiosity on a daily basis. It's second nature to them. They may be talking about it with peers and colleagues. They may be watching a tennis match, mowing the grass, driving, but they can recognise it when they see it. The story about poor Terry Lovelock and the one-word Heineken brief is a classic example of how this process works best. Terry tortured himself trying to refine the ultimate tagline that embodied the one word refreshment. Back at CDP, the clock was ticking, but Frank Lowe understood this. He was pushed to his limits dealing with the needs of the client, but he defended Terry with a passion that gave him enough breathing space to do his job properly. And you know what? At 3 a.m, the muse kindled the flame of Terry's heart and bingo! Heineken refreshes the parts other beers cannot reach. A tagline that lived on for decades and is still fondly recalled by the great and the good of the advertising industry. And as Mike said, when your peers hold you in high esteem, there's no greater accolade. So, when a client starts to interfere with the process for whatever reason, they're poisoning the well. It's up to the client to have the maturity to understand the process, and it's down to the creative to obsess, to listen, to be curious, to understand, and to spin it into gold. Our greatest enemy is the skip ad button. Let's all understand our own particular role in the creative process and get back to making our advertising, our PR and digital marketing campaigns things that live on in modern culture. If nothing else, for the good of the planet. Because as we concluded from the last show with Sir John Hegarty, not all green ideas are creative ideas, but all truly creative ideas are green ideas. They need less energy, time and budget to do the job. My thanks again to Mike Everett. Go buy his book. The link is in the show notes at thefuelpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. Please do me a favour and like us, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and help us keep bringing you all the very best talk from around the world of creativity, marketing and growth. My thanks to Team Fuel, that's Donna, Matt S and Matt B, who all add their own unique skills to help make this show possible. And finally, props to MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network, a stable of marketing podcasts and video shows that bring all the latest views on everything from influencer and content marketing, digital tech and vertical insight to help you be a better marketer. Find all the shows at marketingpodcast.net. The link is also in the show notes for this programme. That's it for now. We'll be in your ear again soon on The Fuel Podcast, where sales and marketing never sounded so good. Ta-ta, everyone.